And now WFTL welcomes you to a different kind of radio program, The Mike Spindell Show. The opinions expressed on this show are those of Mr. Spindell, his guests and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the staff and management of WFTL Radio or any of its sponsors. And now, here's Mike Spindell.
To know him is to love him. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to my job. I'm Mike Spindell. It's 8:05 Eastern Daylight Savings Time, and if you think you forgot to change your clocks 2 hours ahead, well, you're all on time, folks, because I have been moved back an hour earlier, and I'll be here from 8 until 10 this evening and every evening here on WFTL. One thing I want to mention to you, that Psychic Dimensions, if you've been searching for the right mate, the right companion, Harley Lois Davidson has got a girl or a guy for you. This Sunday night, Harley begins a brand new feature called Starmates. Starmates. 2637.2. Harley will match people up right on the air based on their astrological forecasts and their compatibility, their basic feeling, etc. So listen for that Psychic Dimension Sunday nights at its brand new time, 10 o'clock until the witching hour, only on WFTL. And my name is Mike Spindell, and we certainly hope that you'll spend your Sunday evenings with us from 8 until 10 o'clock. And we have a special program for you. This is our part 2, so to speak, of our Salute to Television. And while we're going to be a little bit humorous in the second hour, the first hour we're going to get some downright serious information. We're going to be talking to Kim Hayes, and Kim is the executive director of the Action for Children's Television Group that was set up by Peggy Charon. And we're going to talk about Kid Vid, as they like to call it, and children's video and some of the things, some of the concerns that are espoused by Action for Children's Television. And we'll be talking about that with Kim Hayes, who I said is the executive director. They sent down a plethora, how do you like that word, plethora, of information to me. And it's Act News, and they have a beautiful magazine called React. And there's some very, very interesting reading in there. If you'd like to become a member or become involved with Action for Children's Television, what you simply have to do is just drop a line to Action for Children's Television, 46 Austin Street, Newtonville, Massachusetts, 02160. And that's all you have to do. If you're concerned about what your children or your grandkids are watching on Saturday morning television, I know, being a parent myself, that it's sometimes very easy to plop Junior in front of the television set and take that extra half-hour snooze on Saturday or Sunday morning. But I think as a concerned parent, one should be aware of the programs that the children are watching. We'll be talking to Kim in a short while. I'm going to be giving you the opportunity throughout the 8 to 10 hour to get involved with our trivia program. What we'd like you to do is to send in your trivia questions to trivia care of Mike Spindell, WFTL Radio, 2100 Northwest 21st Avenue in Fort Lauderdale, 33310. And if your questions are used by yours truly, that's me, the big guy on the radio, and you're able to stump our listeners, and maybe we'll have a question outstanding for, let's say, a half hour. And if nobody answers that question, you will win the prize. Of course, if a listener calls in and answers it, well, then you're down the porcelain facilities. But still, you've given it a good shot. And today, as always, we have some passes to Wometco Theaters to give away, and also our good friends over at the 17th Street Causeway at Ocean World. So those are some interesting prizes. We'll be doing that from about 9:05 after I give my little tribute to the city of Oakland Park. We'll be doing that from about 9:05 till about 10 o'clock. Let's do our tribute to Oakland Park and then take our first break and then place the call to Kim Hayes. Can we do all that? Yes, he says, and we'll do that right now. And we're back. Just received a little note that was passed to me by my crack producer that my guest, Stephen Scheuer, will be unable to be with us again this evening from 9 until 10. So that's why we have to segue, and we're going to get the trivia bit. This was supposed to be my tribute, quote-unquote, or examination of the different areas of television. Last week, Stephen was supposed to be with us. We put it forward for this week. And unfortunately, Stephen has some family illness, is unable to attend, and we will book that show for a later date. Don't forget, next Sunday night, which is May 1st, May Day, we have scheduled as our guest from 9 to 10, the president of Channel 39, WDZL, Susan Garamillo. And she'll be here to talk about Opie and talk about Leave It to Beaver and Buck Rogers and Batman and a lot of the things that Channel 39 is doing, coming on strong. They are really taking the area by storm as an independent television station. So we'll be talking to Susan, our part 3, so to speak, of our in-depth study of television right here on WFTL on the Mike Spindell program. We're going to be talking with Kim Hayes, who's the executive director for Action for Children's Television, and we're going to be talking about some of the very, very interesting areas that ACT gets into. Perhaps we'll ask about the Disney Channel and also talk about the Newsweek article, which said that the TV industry's most boosterish trade body, the National Association of Broadcasters, would be the last to announce that America's disenchantment with the tube is approaching a critical mass. We'll be talking about that NAB survey. Is our guest on the line? Well, then let us talk to Kim Hayes. Kim, welcome to South Florida via the WFTL microphones.
Thank you, Mike. I wish I were there live. It's got to be better than our pouring rain up here.
Well, we had a bout with rain. We had a bout with some bad weather a while ago, but we realize what you folks up north have been going through, kind of strange conditions for April.
That's right. That's right.
Well, listen, we'll try to keep you warm and comfortable here and maybe send some of this Florida. Well, I don't know. The sun is down, so we'll have to send you some Florida moonshine, so to speak, up to where you are.
Sounds good.
Okay, the obvious first question, basically, is what is ACT, and why is it saying such terrible things about the state of children's television?
Hopefully not too terrible things.
Okay.
We are an organization, 15 years old now, a nonprofit organization that works to try to improve children's experiences with television. And we do that in a couple of ways. First of all, we try to work with parents and teachers because we feel that one of the problems is children's viewing habits, and the way to change that is to try to get parents to, for example, watch television with their children or just plain turn off the television set more often when their children are watching. But we also try to work with broadcasters and to basically hassle broadcasters, not to put too fine words to it, because we feel that broadcasters are not serving the child audience. There simply is not enough programming on the air that's designed for children. And the third thing we try to do is to work through the Federal Communications Commission, the agency in Washington that licenses broadcasters to operate, because we feel they, too, have an obligation to see that children are served. So that's the 3 ways that we work, and we're only a staff of 10 people, but we're a national organization.
And they do tremendous work. I'm looking through some of the literature that was sent down, and interestingly enough, before we booked this show, I also cut out some interesting articles from both the newspaper and from Newsweek magazine. Last week, we had not on as a guest, but a topic that we talked about, a book by a young lady by the name of Joan Anderson Wilkins, who has written a book called Breaking the TV Habit.
Uh-huh.
And she has sort of a 4-week no TV program diet, so to speak, to gain control of your viewing habits. And we discussed that for a while, and it seems that basically the audience really does not control what their children watch. And I think that that's the most important facet of the discussion that we could have this evening. As Captain Kangaroo is always want to say, you know, spend some time with your young person, but specifically to paraphrase that, watch what he's watching or they're watching.
Yes, I think I think you're right, Mike, that's a very important part of improving children's experiences with television. I also think, though, that, and I'm not a parent, although many of the people who work at ACT are parents, but I feel that if I were a parent, the thing that would make me the most angry, and I know from the parents I talk to that this does make them angry, the thing that would make me the most angry is that if I want to choose television with my child, if I want to sit down with my child and try to find something that I feel is right for them to watch, that the choice is terrible, that there simply is not programming on the air designed for children. except on public broadcasting and on Saturday morning. And there are many people who feel that Saturday morning is worse than nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
ACT is not one of those people. Certainly Saturday morning cartoons are one choice, and there's nothing wrong with cartoons. The problem is that cartoons is all there is. And one of the things that we say is, yes, it's a parent's responsibility to try to watch with their child, choose with their child, help their child understand when they see adult programming. But the poor parents, they can't do everything. If they sit down, for example, with their child say a preschool child or a young child home from school in the afternoon and try to find something on commercial television, not public television, they will find that there is no nationally broadcast commercial television program on a regular basis.
Let me just ask you this. Captain Kangaroo, of course, got the royal boot. The royal boot from CBS. At one time down here on our local television affiliate, WTVJ, Channel 4, we tried to mount a campaign to have the captain saved from oblivion, but he was put on at 6:30 in the morning, which was a stupid time because
who wants to wake up their child just to stick them in front of the television?
Precisely. And also at a later time, most of those kids that would have enjoyed Captain Kangaroo were in school, but basically he has now been relegated to Saturday morning down here at 7 o'clock.
And I take it is not on in Sunday in Florida.
No, it's not. It's preempted for religious programming
on Sunday from the network feed, but of course a lot of people other local stations choose to put on other programming.
Especially those religious programs that make a whole bunch of money.
That's right. So there is the one program that was available on commercial television nationally every day, gone now on Saturday, just like all the rest of the children's television.
And another fine program was removed, I guess, to put some more dumb cartoons on. And let me just stop it right here because I do enjoy cartoon programming. I did since I was a little person and sat with my milk and my graham crackers and watched Captain Kangaroo and watched a lot of cartoons. I think I grew up into a pretty good individual.
And
but again,
so did I. I watched those cartoons too. I mean, practically every
G.I. Joe and all the kind of militaristic turn that television has taken in the last 2 years. I think bringing Beetle Bailey will be something a little bit that will diffuse it and show Army life in a kind of a satirical vein. That's the way I see it.
I hope you're right. Of course, what often happens, and certainly I'm not tremendously worried about this, but I think what often does happen when television, not only children's television, but television in general, takes something and turns it into a program, is that it can radically change. So it will be interesting to see whether, if there is a Beetle Bailey cartoon, whether it will keep that satirical anti-army slant of the cartoon strip, which I remember well, or whether it will change it in some way. If that does come on the air, it'll be interesting to see, you know.
I think one of the other interesting aspects, and perhaps you could talk about that, is with FCC's Reagan-enhanced deregulation. How has children's programming been affected? Has the FCC commissioners have they changed their views? Are they changing? Where does that stand?
Well, let me tell you that this is a very appropriate time for you to ask that question and a very appropriate time for me to be talking to you at all about children's television, because this Thursday the FCC is holding hearings on the children's television rulemaking proceeding, which act began in 1970, 13 years ago. We went in 1970 to the FCC after looking at children's television and realizing, we're first saying to ourselves, how can we fix this problem? And realizing, broadcasters are licensed by the FCC to operate in the public interest and to serve the public. Children are an important part, certainly, of the public, and they aren't being served almost at all. We thought to ourselves, my goodness, this is a place where the FCC can step in, not to say this is a good program or this is a bad program, because that would be government censorship, and that would be terrible. That would be worse than the worst TV program you can imagine. The last thing I want is Washington saying what's a good program and what's a bad program. But the FCC could step in and say, broadcasters, you have to air more hours of programming designed for children. Just as years ago, the FCC stepped in and said, broadcasters, you have to air more news and public affairs. And I'm sure the broadcasters grumbled, but look where they are now. News and 60 Minutes are the best-rated things on TV.
That's
They
correct.
did it because they had to do it, and they started to do it better and better and better, and now people love it. I'm not saying that you're going to get the whole nation watching children's programming, but we say at ACT that if the FCC said to broadcasters, look, you're licensed to serve the public, you're not serving children, and which is, after all, 30, 40 million people out there, you better do it. And we will set a minimum number of hours a week in which you have to put programming designed for children. What it is up to you, but you do it. I believe that broadcasters, we all believe at ACT, that if broadcasters had to do it, they'd start to do it better and better, as they have done with news, and that eventually they would just be part of what they did. And then maybe the rule could go away. But we asked then in 1970 for a rule that from the FCC that broadcasters would have to air a minimum amount of children's programming.
Let me ask you.
13 years later, we're still
certainly
waiting
is.
for them to come to a decision on this proceeding, which they initiated in 1970. And this Thursday, they're finally having this commission that Reagan appointed chairman in this commission is finally holding hearings on this proceeding.
Certainly is about time, and Mark Fowler is the chairman, and I have seen some of his articles in the newspaper, and one of them he's now saying that children's shows are an example of the kind of programming that some people believe is in short supply in the commercial areas, so he's making a little bit of a turnaround, isn't he?
Well, we feel very proud of that. When he first came into office, he is the champion of, as he calls it, unregulation, a real Reagan man in that sense. He said, basically, I mean, I'm not quoting him directly, but he said, look, I don't think the FCC really should be telling broadcasters what to do at all, in spite of the fact I think that's the FCC's job. But he said, no, deregulation, and children, when we went to him about children, he said, what do you mean? Children have a wonderful choice of programs. And we challenged him to tell us just what he was talking about. We couldn't find this wonderful choice of programs.
I have to move back to the question about superior or at least acceptable cartoons or TV cartoons on Saturday morning. And my choice really would be the Fat Albert Show. I think that's one of the most superior programs. Not only that, but because I see a racial mix. I know that there are many different groups represented. I don't think that they stereotype it as badly as some people might think, specifically with Fat Albert Group. Mm-hmm. And again, anything that Bill Cosby usually is involved in, I think, is of a superior nature.
Yeah, it is an excellent cartoon, and certainly one that we, as an organization, have given an award to. And it's recognized by a number of groups around the country.
But you want to notice something that's subtly done by CBS? The time that they put the Fat Albert Show on.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's this way all over, but it's about 12:30 in the afternoon.
12:30, that's right. At a time when the audience for the show is way down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me do this. We have some coin to put in our famous little till. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be back with Kim Hayes to wrap things up until 9 o'clock. And we do appreciate you taking time out of a Sunday night to be with us, Kim. We'll be right back.
Sure.
And we're back, and our guest is Kim Hayes. She's the Executive Director for Action for Children's Television. And, Kim, we're back.
Hi, Mike.
Question for you. There was an article in our local paper down here, the Miami Herald, by a John Rosemond. Now, it says John Rosemond. He's with the Knight Ridder News Service. It doesn't say anything else about him, but I cut it out because there was a question in my mind. A letter was written to him about shows like Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, and the rest of things on television are all junk. And what he is saying is television watching requires that the watcher do little more than stare and stay awake. A child watching television is not using any talent or exercising any skills that contribute to the development of social or intellectual competence. And they mention an area: active problem solving, interpersonal communication, imagination, initiative, motivation, creativity, resourcefulness, a long attention span, visual tracking, perceptual motor coordination, and large muscle activity. And not only does he go into that, but then he damns Sesame Street, says it's as much of a one-way street as the Dukes of Hazzard. He says that the notion that preschool children can learn the alphabet, numerals, and even basic reading from Sesame Street is nothing more than hype. He says there's no trick to teaching children these pre-academic skills, and he said children don't need to know them before they go to school. It goes further on to say that a Russell Sage Foundation concluded that heavy viewers of Sesame Street demonstrated fewer gains in cognitive skills than light viewers. And then he talks about Mr. Rogers as another story. Although I still feel that Fred Rogers' programs makes no significant contribution to the child's overall development, I recommend it for 3 reasons. Rather than pushing academics, Rogers strives to heighten a child's awareness. Rogers establishes a relationship with his audience, and then it's to his knowledge, Mr. Rogers is the only show that uses primarily one camera to stop the hyperactive flicker of television. Now, if you'd like, I could send you a copy of this, because it's quite interesting, and as a firm believer in Sesame Street as being an adjunct to children's growth, I wonder what your comment is about it.
Well, I'd certainly be interested to see the article, and I don't get hot under the collar about it, because I think that at all, I think one of the interesting things about television is, and about public television and particularly here, is that it does offer a choice. Mm-hmm. Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers are 2 extraordinarily different programs, as anyone who's ever seen them can say. Sesame Street is incredibly fast-paced, full of animation, constantly moving, and Mr. Rogers drives some adults out of their minds because it's a very slow program. Sesame Street is trying to teach cognitive skills, and Mr. Rogers is trying to teach basically about feelings and emotions and trying to create a bond. I certainly, personally, and ACT feels, having given awards to both programs, ACT feels that both programs have a lot of merit. I think this is where parents have to make their own choices. I think there are parents who are appalled by the jumpiness of Sesame Street, or who don't like certain things about it, and there are other parents who find Mr. Rogers nauseating. It's such a personal thing. It's a familial style. Mm-hmm. So I think this is where some kids watch both. In some cases, parents swear by one or the other. Children themselves obviously make these choices. It's not some 3-year-olds won't watch one or the other.
I really had never thought about that flicker that they talk about, the hyperactive flicker characteristic.
The hyperactivity of Sesame Street. Mm-hmm. It's definitely, I've heard, nothing can be perfect. I've heard teachers complain about the fact that Sesame Street conditions children to come to school expecting to be entertained. But what people have to remember is that when Sesame Street started, which is now a long time ago, 68, I think, or 67, 68, 69, it was almost a part of the whole idea of Head Start. It was a program very specifically geared to children, very often minority children and poor children who had not had a chance to even learn their colors. Children who didn't get enough stimulus from parents because their parents were working, and who didn't know that milk came from cows, who didn't know what up and down were. And Sesame Street has become the darling of, the public television set, which in some cases is middle-class people, but it started and it continues to be faithfully watched by children from disadvantaged families, and I think there it does a wonderful job in that those children are now going to school knowing their letters, knowing colors, knowing things that they just hadn't had a chance to learn before. And, it's hard to criticize it. It's hard to criticize the program for its jumpiness, although certainly that exists, when the other things it's doing are so important.
That's a very, very good point that you make, and I appreciate you clarifying that. I will drop the column into the mail and send it on up to your mailing address, which I gave before punching you up earlier this evening at the 8 o'clock hour. I gave the address of those people interested in Action for Children's Television. Usually when we talk in terms of campaigns and we talk in terms of children's television, it's been kind of a David against Goliath pretty much since the start.
I think it still is.
What are some of the victories or the notable victories that ACT has gotten their act together, so to speak?
Well, I think one of our victories has been that we have reduced the minutes of commercials that are now on Saturday morning. The minutes of commercials on Saturday morning are now 9.5 minutes, which is equal to what adult primetime television commercial minutes are. Were reduced as a result of ACT's pressure by more than a third, and daytime television commercials for children on weekdays, what few programs that are